The Myles Garrett trade request.
Is the season saved? Kansas dominates Iowa State.
A Jalen Brunson masterclass.
The Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Milwaukee Bucks down to a pulp.
It's official. OC stands for officially Kaylee.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Cooper Kupp's time with the Los Angeles Rams is close to coming to an end.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast.
So, breaking news, Cooper Kupp is most likely not going to be on the Rams next season. And how do we know this? Well, Cooper Kupp went to his own social media to reveal that the Rams are looking to trade him immediately. Cooper Kupp wrote, quote, "I was informed that the team will be seeking a trade immediately and will be working with me and my family to find the right place to continue competing for championships. I don't agree with the decision, and I always believed it was going to begin and end in LA. Still, if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, there are so many things that are out of your control, but it is how you respond to these things that you will look back on and remember. I have taken so much pride in playing alongside my teammates for the LA community, so thank you for embracing my family and making this such a special place for us. 2024 began with one of the best training camps of my career. Preparations start now for 2025. Highly motivated, as healthy as ever, and looking forward to playing elite football for years to come. Love you guys, but coming for it all." So that definitely hits pretty bad. I mean, that definitely tugs on the heartstrings. I mean, we knew that this is something that was coming. I prepped you guys for this really for a long, long time. And I told you before that sometimes we need to have uncomfortable conversations on this team. It can't be all sunshine and rainbows for the Los Angeles Rams and for the players that you love, that I love, that we've seen win championships and have great seasons and, most importantly, give us great moments, right? We see Cooper Kupp, we think Super Bowl 56. We see Cooper Kupp, we think of love of the game route. We think of the year that he had. We think of what he's meant to not just this team as far as on-field success, but he's meant to this community. Cooper Kupp was one of the first guys that you really wanted to buy his jersey and that you really wanted to have be one of your favorite players when the Rams returned to Los Angeles. And he is someone that will never be forgotten for ushering in this new era of Rams football as they came back to Los Angeles. You look at 2021, Triple Crown winner, 145 catches, 1,947 receiving yards at 16 touchdowns. He was incredible. Unfortunately, it's the time after that which is leading to the news that we got today. 2022, he struggled to stay on the field. He played just 9 games. Then he missed training camp in parts of 2023, missed time during training camp. 2024, the same thing with the injury. He's only played in 12 games in each of the last 2 seasons. And then you add the fact that from a statistical standpoint, he just isn't that same guy that he was. You're seeing someone that struggles to get separation, struggles to have any sort of explosive plays. He finished the year this year with 5 straight games of less than 70 yards receiving. Then you add the fact that he's entering his age 32 season. So you combine all those factors with the contract situation that he's currently in. Well, it's not a surprise that the Rams are going this direction, because you had to make a decision with Cooper Kupp at some point, and you knew that Les Snead and this team was going to handle this in a respectful way. They were going to handle this in a way that was best for themselves, but also looking out for Cooper Kupp and doing right by Cooper Kupp. I think of Jalen Ramsey going to the Dolphins. I think of moves like that where they don't want to have a situation like this spread where it's not a good move from an optics standpoint. So other players out there don't view the Rams as a favorable destination, right? The Rams realize that the culture is to take care of their players any way they can, but the writing was on the wall with this. We knew that this was possible because of the contract situation. We'll get into that in a second here, but also what happened at the deadline. The Rams were reportedly open to trading Cooper Kupp before the deadline this past season, but unfortunately, really nothing came about just because the Rams at the time were seeking a second-round pick in exchange for Cooper Kupp, and they were willing to take on and eat some of his 2024 salary just to get a deal done. The Rams were willing to do that. There was some talk that the Chiefs could be a potential option before they were able to make that move for DeAndre Hopkins. Nothing came of it. And then after, I remember Sean McVay telling us that some of those reports were this and that, and he just kind of downplayed all those reports. He kind of questioned the validity of those reports, but there was definitely some smoke there. And I can tell you that the Rams certainly were exploring that at the time. And remember, at the time, there was no guarantee that the Rams were going to win the NFC West and win a playoff game and make it to the divisional round. At the time, that was not a foregone conclusion. Thankfully, they did turn their season around, and Cooper Kupp did have some moments. There's no doubt about that. But the Rams have had this front of mind as far as their roster build for some time now. And right now, as far as the trade goes, the question is there a team out there that's going to be willing to take on his current deal? And that is a $12.5 million salary this year and a $14.85 million salary in 2026. So that is a number for a Cooper Kupp that, yeah, statistically, he's not there where he was. He's not playing at a Pro Bowl level. He's not playing at an all-pro level. Could he still help a team? I still certainly think he can. And just reading what he said in his post, this is going to be a very, 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 very motivated Cooper Kupp that is going to want to send a message to the Rams. I don't care what he says and how amicable this separation is. He's going to want to prove to the Rams. He's going to want the Rams to see him have a great season. That is going to be the motivating factor for him. So I think that a team out there looking to trade for him needs to consider that, because Kupp's always been a fighter. Remember, this is someone that didn't go to Alabama or LSU or Ohio State or any of these wide receiver U's. No, this is someone who came out of Eastern Washington, and the Rams selected him in the third round. It was Sean McVay's first draft with the team, and he came out of the gates right away, and he proved doubters wrong. He had 62 catches for 869 yards and 5 touchdowns as a rookie, and he only got better. He only improved from then on. So he knows what it's like to play with a chip on his shoulder, and that's certainly going to be a very motivating factor. And if I'm a team out there that has any interest in Cooper Kupp and I'm looking to upgrade that position, I'm considering it.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. How about a Broadway show? Can't wait to take my kids to Broadway. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Seeing live performers, it's the best. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Myles Garrett trade request.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast.
Myles Garrett has officially requested a trade. I will read you briefly here the statement that he put out through the NFL Network. It says, quote, "As a kid dreaming of the NFL, all I focused on was the ultimate goal of winning a Super Bowl. and that goal fuels me today more than ever. My love for the community of Northeast Ohio and the incredible fan base of the Cleveland Browns has made this one of the toughest decisions of my life. These past 8 years have shaped me into the man that I am today. While I've loved calling the city my home, my desire to win and compete on the biggest stages won't allow me to be complacent. The goal is never to go from Cleveland to Canton. Which keep that line specifically in mind, because we will draw back to that here momentarily. It's an important one. It has always been to compete and win a Super Bowl. With that in mind, I have requested a trade from the Cleveland Browns, signed Myles Garrett. And this was some bombshell news that I don't. Here's the thing. It's surprising, but it's also not surprising. It's surprising in that, and this is my perspective on it, and maybe you feel differently. But from my perspective, like, these comments first came up late in the season. It was week 16, leading into the Bengals game. He was asked about his future, and he did leave the door open for the first time at that point on a potential opportunity to go elsewhere. He made it a possibility that he would not finish his career with the Cleveland Browns, which was it was shocking to all of us on that day, because nobody saw that coming. Nobody expected that. And at the time, it could be written off as different things, like maybe he's making a play for a contract extension, which we know he's going in. He's now not the highest paid defensive player anymore. He probably wants to be going to the last couple of years of his current deal. That all makes sense. It adds up. I kind of lean that way. Like, it felt like, okay, he's saying this because he's the only person in the organization that can, and he does want to hold the organization's feet to the fire a little bit here. But when push comes to shove, Myles Garrett is not leaving this team. Like, that was never a question in my mind, dating back to that moment and him saying those things. And he did say, like, he wanted to hear the plan from the team and what they want to do going forward. Now, after those conversations, he has given indications that he feels like the team isn't as far off as maybe some on the outside think it was. He literally said that in one of the last episodes of the in-season Hard Knocks, that I think the line was something along in the wording of, we're not as far off as it might seem to people. And so, like, that was all to me telling that, like, okay, they had conversations. They must have gone pretty well. They laid out their plan for the future to Myles and said, here's what we're going to do, and we're going to stay competitive. We're not blowing this thing up. And clearly something changed, or he just maybe didn't buy it from the start and he was just saying that for the cameras on Hard Knocks. Who knows? But something changed. And now we're left, in the situation where Myles Garrett is officially requesting a trade. I honestly, like, I kind of wondered if something changed during the Pro Bowl weekend, like the Pro Bowl festivities. Was he having conversations with potential other teammates that he could be teaming up with? Did he, did people make fun of him for the 3-14 season? The fact that he's rotting away on a bad team this past year? I don't know. Sometimes those relationships and those conversations do come into play for guys who see greener pastures elsewhere, and they decide, hey, I want to go chase championships and team up with some of these other guys. I think that's more prevalent in sports than ever before. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the sole reason, but it did kind of make me speculate or wonder if that had anything to do with it. The fact that he was at the Pro Bowl this weekend around guys who he obviously has great relationships with, and some of the other best players in this league, and he's sitting there like, man, where is our team coming up short? So I don't know. That's just pure speculation on my end, but I did find the timing of that kind of interesting, especially given that it sounded like he was okay with whatever the team laid out as their plans moving forward in the weeks since making those comments, in the weeks since the season ended. Clearly that's not the case. And so now there are so many different tentacles, so many different branch realities or alternatives that kind of come off of this main topic of Myles Garrett requesting a trade. And we'll have plenty of time this week to dissect each and every single one of them and attack this topic in this story from all those different angles. But I think where I want to start is that this changes the math on everything the Browns had planned this offseason. Whatever plan they laid out to Myles, whatever they were sort of selling him as our path forward to staying competitive and still trying to chase championships, whatever that was, if Myles Garrett's requesting a trade, you throw it out the window. It's gone. It is time officially to blow it up. And I have been, as you might know from watching this show or hearing me on other platforms that I work on or in other spaces, you know that I have been staunchly against blowing this thing up and starting from scratch, because that doesn't guarantee anything. Look what it got the Browns. 2 playoff wins in a 4-year span, or 2 playoff appearances in a 4-year span, 1 playoff win. and a window that now looks like it's closing even more abruptly than anybody thought could be possible to chase championships. Like, it still didn't get you the ultimate prize. So I'm generally against blowing it up. But if Myles Garrett is going to force his way out, and if this thing is going to get ugly, because right now the organization is saying we're not going to move on from him. Andrew Berry said that at his end of season press conference. He had that line in there about the direct path from Cleveland to Canton for Myles Garrett, which again, something that Myles Garrett referenced in his statement, which makes me think like behind the scenes, like maybe he's not as happy with this organization or Andrew Berry's plans or whatever as he might have let on, because for him to sort of take a shot like that at Andrew Berry's direct quote from his press conference is incredible. I mean, there's something there as to why he did that, especially, and this is again, Myles Garrett was a guy who was saying towards the end of the season, as long as these guys are in place, as long as the people in power are still here, I feel comfortable with this group, which is part of the reason why I'm assuming they didn't why the Hasms decided to stick with this group moving forward, because they probably trusted them as much as Myles Garrett trusts them. Now I think that gets called into question. And so as you talk about blowing it up, there's so many more levels to that as well of, do you trust Andrew Berry to be the one to sort of do the rebuild here? Do you trust Andrew Berry to lead this team into the next era of whatever this looks like and get the team back to prominence as quickly as possible? Those are all questions we can explore at a later time. But I do think in my heart of hearts, like, this has to mean you start over. If Myles Garrett wants a trade, and he is forcing his way out and he's going to make this thing as ugly as possible, you're no longer playing for championships. You're no longer playing to win because you're losing your cornerstone player. You are planning for the future, not winning now. That is what you're playing for if Myles Garrett really forces his way out of Cleveland. It's just plain and simple. You're trading him for picks. That's what it's going to be. You are going to trade him for draft compensation that allows you to stockpile as many talented players in the next couple of years of drafts as possible and build this roster again from the ground up. Again, we can have questions and conversations about whether or not Andrew Berry is the right person for that task. And I get it. Like, I'm doing a really sharp pivot here from being the guy who's like, I don't think the roster is that far off. I don't think you have to blow it up. I don't think you have to start all over. It doesn't guarantee you anything. That was all before thinking Myles Garrett really was going to force his way out of here. With that in context and that new story and this new this new part of this equation, I can't figure out, like, a lot of my take on that centered around, well, you have a cornerstone player, Myles Garrett, that you can still build around, who's in the prime of his career. You have some other cornerstone players, but once Myles is gone, that changes the math on everything. You don't have that generational talent anymore if he gets traded. So I know it's a sharp pivot, like I said, but for me, this has to be now a complete change of plans. Whatever your plans were this offseason to bolster the roster around what you already have, forget it. Assuming they're actually going to trade him, because again, they're digging their feet in the sand and saying they won't, which I do want to talk about coming up. But if they actually, if Myles Garrett trade happens, if they can't mend fences, and I think that's going to be harder to do than probably what it seems, you have to, I think, pivot to a completely different plan of, let's accumulate draft capital. Let's draft as many players as we think are going to help us and reconstruct this roster this offseason, and focus on what next offseason looks like as well. Get draft compensation for 2026 and figure out how we can get this franchise, turn this roster over into a contending team in the future rather than right now. That's just plain and simple. My whole premise initially centered around Myles Garrett was going to be here. He was going to still be your cornerstone player, and you have pieces and parts to build around. You'd still have some of those guys. Denzel Ward hasn't requested a trade. There's other players that are foundational pieces that could still potentially still be here beyond a Myles Garrett trade situation. Although maybe that changes too. If they see Myles once out, maybe others want out. Who knows? But sitting here today, my plan hinged on you still have that generational talent in Myles Garrett on this roster, and you can't let that go to waste. Without that player, changes everything. And so I do think this is now a situation where the Browns have to consider blowing it up this offseason and rethink whatever they were going to do this offseason, throw it out, scrap it, start fresh, and focus on draft accumulation, draft capital accumulation, draft talent from the next couple years coming out of the college ranks accumulation, and build this roster back to prominence from the ground up. I think that's just the way it's going to have to be.
Is the season saved? Kansas dominates Iowa State.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Kansas victorious here 69-52 over Iowa State. And Allen Fieldhouse Big Monday. It just heals all, apparently. They just don't lose on Big Monday at home under Bill Self. And this was a really impressive win for a lot of different accords for KU, right? Because Kansas smashed a good Iowa State team who, as much as we talked about Kansas being desperate coming into this game, Iowa State was desperate coming into this game too. They had lost 2 straight games. They had lost by almost 20 points at home. But I think Kansas matched that desperation in this game. Kansas was great on the defensive end of the floor. They held Iowa State to 31% from the floor. They held Iowa State to 14% from 3. And really won this game on that defensive end of the floor, I would say. I mean, anytime you only give up 52 points. Now, did Iowa State have a bad offensive game mixed with KU having a good offensive or defensive game? Yes, I would say so. Like, Iowa State did miss some shots that maybe they would normally make. They only shot, 55% on free throws, but still, it was, I think, a combination of both when you look at what happened here. KU had a really good shooting game themselves, right? I mean, they shoot 47% from the floor, 50% from 3, 9 of 18 on 3-pointers. They were 8 of 11, so they took care of business, at least on the free throws in this one. And it really came from 3 guys for KU for that shooting, because Hunter Dickinson was 7 of 12. DeJuan Harris was 4 of 6. Zeke Mayo was 6 of 13. You total those 3 up, and you're left with 17 of 31, which is above 50%. They also combined to make 5 of 7 from 3. So if you take away those guys from the rest of the team, Kansas would have shot 4 of 11 from 3-point range, which would still be good, but it's not as good as 5 of 7. And then if you take away the 2-point shots, then you're looking at, them shooting closer to 40% as a team. So those 3 guys were pretty pivotal for KU on the offensive end. And you total it all up. Obviously, there were other players that contributed there, but the wild part of this one for the win for KU is, part of the keys to the game for me coming in were thinking that Kansas needed to match Iowa State's intensity on the glass and needing to do well in the turnover department. Well, Kansas ended up with 13 turnovers, which is certainly better than it was in the game in Ames when it's up to 17. So, they did better there. But Iowa State only had 7. I thought that was an area where Kansas, they did force a good amount of turnovers themselves in the game in Ames. And in Iowa State's 3 of their losses this year are their 3 worst turnover games. Well, that wasn't the case tonight, but the difference, a lot of those turnovers were not live ball. There was a big difference in points off turnovers for Iowa State in the first matchup. That wasn't the case this time. It was only 10-9 Iowa State points off turnovers in this game, which for a team that, that's one of their identities, that's kind of a win for Kansas to that be the case. But did this save the season? The ultimate question here, is this a season, saving victory? I think it depends on your point of view. There might be the point of view where it's just like, I don't really think the season needed saving, right? I mean, I get it. They're not having as great of a season as you could imagine and hope for, but they're still going to make the tournament. They're still ranked 16th in the country. Other schools, other teams would die for, your down year being ranked 16th in the country. Other schools would be like, that's our high year being ranked 16th in the country, right? So if that's your point of view, then no, the season did not need saving. But if your point of view is, hey, this is Kansas basketball, the expectations, championships, Big 12 championships, Final Fours, national titles, right? If that is the bar you're going to judge them on, for better or for worse, which I think, unfairly or not, I think that is the bar that we judge them on. I think that this kind of saves it in that way. And it's weird in college basketball just in general, because it's such a weird sport where March Madness is so weird and there's so many teams in it that in a weird way, as long as you make the NCAA tournament, there really is no season enders or season savers in the regular season if you view it that way, because you could get an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament and make the national title game like North Carolina did a couple of years ago. You could get an 11 seed or whatever, NC State, and make it to a Final Four, right? That is allowed to happen. But if you're looking at your best opportunities and for where things are, right, it involves playing your best basketball and being the best team you can be over the course of the regular season to turn into that run in March, right? Those runs that we talk about, they do happen all the time in March, but if you're looking at specific school to school, it's more of the rarity. And so for Kansas to start feeling like they're playing better, to start feeling like they are a better team, I do think this is kind of a season saver in a real way. Now, of course, there's a chance you could give it back on Saturday. Playing in Manhattan against a K-State team that has all of a sudden found life and is playing really good basketball right now, right? And you've lost the last 2 years in Manhattan. Of course, you could lose that game, and then it's going to feel like you kind of took a step forward and then you took a step back, and you're kind of back to square one, so to speak. But this was really important. You look at the upcoming stretch after the Kansas State game, there's a lot of winnable games. And so guaranteeing that you're going to at least go 1-1 this week and guaranteeing that you're not going to go 0-2 this week and what would lead to a 3-game losing streak is very important. But also this gives you the opportunity to build on this. This gives you the opportunity for momentum, because now if you do win that game at Kansas State on Saturday, and then you have that upcoming stretch where you think you have some good winnable games in front of you, it's going to feel like you can get this thing really rolling headed into the Big 12 tournament or headed into March or however way you're looking at it. And so if we are looking of this as, what is this team truly? How good can they truly be? I do think this kind of saves the season in a weird way. Again, kind of just depending on your point of view there. Now, beyond what the win means and what happened in the game, I do think this is quickly becoming a little segment that we do in our open here and all of our game recaps is the lineup talk, because it seems like there's different lineup talk to go over each and every game for KU. So some of the interesting notes of this one, we got to see Rylan Griffin start the game for KU. He ended up playing 23 minutes in the game, and I think that would have ended up being more. He got those 2 fouls in the first half. I think if he doesn't pick up those 2 fouls in the first half, he probably does play closer to, maybe 26, 27, 28 minutes in this game. And it wasn't even a particularly great game for Rylan Griffin. It was a really, you had the foul trouble in the first half, and then also he just wasn't making threes in the first half. He was getting open looks. Like, those are going to go down for Rylan Griffin over the long haul because he's too good of a shooter for them not to. But he had a good second half. Again, you look at the stats, you're like, oh, he had 5 points on 2 of 6 shooting, and he had 0 rebounds, 1 assist. Like, how good of a game. I thought the second half he was really good. He had that drop-off pass to KJ Adams driving into the lane. And I think we've seen a little bit more ability by Rylan Griffin to drive and do that this season than maybe you thought coming into the year, where it seemed like the main attribute was the 3-point shooting. He did hit the 1-3 in the corner in the second half. He also had that nice aggressive drive and transition where he throws down that really cool dunk. So I thought second half Rylan was really good. I thought first half it just came down to, hey, when you're a 3-point shooter, like, it's just going to come down to your production, if it's good or bad, whether you're making the shots or whether you're missing them. He was missing them tonight, but picked a good night to miss them because Kansas won by 17, and they're going to need him to make some in some other games that are going to be closer. And so, I like the fact that Bill Self, trusted him enough to start the game and stayed with him starting in the second half. And I think there will be long-term positives if they continue to do that. We did see Flory off the bench with KJ starting, and that was certainly to the ire of the students in attendance. And you got the Flory chants and the "We Want Flory" chants, and that certainly created some divisiveness among KU fans and broadcasters alike. I thought KJ played a really good first half for KU. I thought it wasn't as active in the second half, but overall I thought KJ was good for KU. Again, I still would like to see Flory play more than 15 minutes per game. I continue to say this. I think KJ is a good basketball player. I think he's a helpful basketball player. I think Flory is a great basketball player. And so to me, if KJ is playing 22, 24, 25 minutes per game and Flory's playing 22, 24, 25 minutes per game, fine, that totally works for me. I'm not as big in love with the 32 to 15 minutes, but I say all that to say KJ was probably better than Flory in this game today, right? I do think there are certain things you could point to where, you would have certain plays where Flory would make where it's like, yeah, you probably don't get that from KJ. There's also some other, plays where Flory would make where it's like, yeah, KJ probably doesn't make that mistake, right? And that's kind of the back and forth that you're going over. I did think it was interesting, though, that when Flory came into the game, it wasn't with Hunter, which has been that lineup that I think has been working pretty well. When they threw Flory in the game at first, and I think for a lot of his minutes for the game, it was next to KJ Adams as opposed to Hunter, which I prefer the Flory-Hunter lineup, I think, over the Flory and KJ one. But in the end, those are kind of the big lineup notes, in addition to, I guess, KJ playing 32 minutes and DeJuan playing 35 minutes. And that would be the other thing here. Shaquille Moore only played 2 minutes in this game, okay? David Coy played 9 minutes, felt like a very quiet 9 minutes. maybe the rotation is cutting down finally, right? Like maybe Bill Self is just saying, I'm going to go with, the 4 guys I trust are going to be getting 30 plus minutes per night. And we're going to really get this thing down to like an 8-man rotation with the 9th guy getting spot minutes. I don't know. Maybe that was just a 1-game thing. Maybe it wasn't, but I certainly found it interesting because Shaquille Moore did make a 3, but he was quickly out of the game after that. Did have the shot clock violation. But bottom line here, this feels like a win that could restart your season in a positive way. Like it feels like a win that reminds, I think, both this team and the fans what this team is capable of against a good opponent. I was talking during the preview and I talked to a bunch of KU fans, whether it was in my inner circle, I talked to people at work, I talked to, whatever, like kind of gauging the environment of like how people felt going into this game. And, I had my personal feelings on things too, that like, if you were comparing the confidence meter, so to speak, of a home game at Allen Fieldhouse against a good opponent for tonight, before the game started, before the game tipped off, versus past years and past games with this team, this would be lower on the confidence meter than a lot of those other ones, if not the lowest point. But they still won by 17. And so I think that's what this is. This is a reminder of what they're capable of, that Allen Fieldhouse is still this omnipresent being of a basketball court. And you didn't just win, you dominated against a really strong opponent. And beyond that, got some good contributions from Rylan Griffin, got some good contributions from AJ Storr. Like those are things that can be tangible game changers for you in the long run. And so I think just a lot to come away from here, and a nice bounce back win that you do hope is the start of that nice run for KU.
Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy for you to get in on the action. And with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature will also allow you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's just icing on the cake. And one bet that you could look at with that $5 could be on the NBA tonight. Let's check it out. The Indiana Pacers continue a westward road trip to face the Portland Trailblazers, and are favored. FanDuel likes the Pacers by 5 points. The Pacers are on a bit of a heater, so maybe they can keep up that momentum. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you could score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
A Jalen Brunson masterclass.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
A thrilling yet tense Knicks win. I knew they won this game because I was watching on delay, and my stomach was still in my throat most of the second half. Thankfully, the New York Knicks had Jalen Brunson. The Rockets didn't. He scores 17 points in the fourth quarter, 11 in the final 4 minutes, finishes with 42, 10 and 6, 14 to 27 from the field, 13 to 14 from the line. Absolutely electric finish for him.
Yeah, he was awesome. This would have been just a horrendous loss playing a team without Van Vliet and Şengün. I feel like the Knicks have been playing a lot of those games recently. I don't know if opponents have had bad injury luck overall against the Knicks, but it just feels like so often the Knicks are playing these games where it's like, if they win, great, they beat this kind of shorthanded team. And if they lose, oh gosh, the sky is falling. So it was nice of Brunson to save the Knicks from that feeling, waking up tomorrow, going into a back-to-back, coming off a loss that they definitely shouldn't have been close to. And we'll get into some reasons why, but this was a game that should have been theirs from the beginning. It wasn't, but yeah, it was nice that they pulled it out.
Yeah, I'm torn on that because the Rockets, I literally, yes, I think I agree with you, but the Rockets were also so impressive. And I think the one thing that offsets those injuries, despite the fact that obviously the Knicks had issues with no OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns clearly not at 100%. It feels like teams have injuries against the Knicks, and then their backups just play out of their mind. Like Aaron Holiday had 15 points in 17 minutes, was 3 for 7 from 3, hit, like maybe this is a typical shot for him, but hit 2 just like crazy one-handed runners. I thought like maybe no one else on the Rockets like really played insane. Like Amen Thompson has just been doing this at this point. Cam Whitmore was pretty crazy, 18 points in 23 minutes. Obviously, he can do that, but credit to Raphael Stone. They've just put together like just an exceptionally deep, exceptionally athletic roster. It was an area the Knicks were really hurt this whole game, giving up 20 offensive rebounds, 17 second chance points. But I do like some of these nights I've come off games like this where they play really shorthanded teams, and I've been somewhat disgusted and just been like, oh man, just happy to get the win. Like I will give them some credit. Mike Breen had the stat. They were 0 for 8 at home when trailing coming into the fourth quarter. They outscored Houston 46-29 in the final 12 minutes. I do think there was some real mettle, and obviously what Brunson did, what Mikhail did, even Cat early in the quarter, like he was playing terribly offensively, and he goes 4 for 5 in the fourth quarter for 11 points. I am impressed with that fourth quarter, even given all the caveats, though I think you would say part of the reason that fourth quarter was so impressive was because Deuce McBride was out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if anything changed in the fourth quarter. Was there anything different about the fourth quarter? That
I preempted that. I know where the hot hand theory stands.
I was glad you brought up the offensive rebounding, because the Knicks played way bigger than the Rockets did the entire game. And for starters, I don't buy this idea that rebounding is super correlates super well with winning in the first place. I mean, what was the offensive rebounding difference against the Lakers? I think the Knicks out rebounded the Lakers 16-3 on the offensive glass against the Lakers, and the Lakers just said, we don't really care about a size disadvantage. We're just going to create as many good threes as we can. And when you adjust to that, we're going to get to the rim. And they didn't care about the rebounding disadvantage. And so I'm not saying rebounding and size are just toss them away. They mean nothing. But I don't like this idea that things like shooting, which I think shooting is the most important thing in today's game, that's seen as this, we can do it for spurts, but eventually the size difference will overwhelm them and it'll wear them out. And then when you're sacrificing shooting for size, that is seen as this thing that can just overcome anything else. When to me, it goes the other way. To me, on the net, these lineups with Deuce and Brunson that are a little bit smaller, that slide Hart to power forward. I mean, Gavin, last season, across every single lineup that played 300 or more possessions of non-garbage time, do you know what the second best lineup in the entire NBA was?
Give it to me.
It was Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Dante DiVincenzo at small forward, Josh Hart at power forward, and Isaiah Hartenstein at center. Now, I know that Hartenstein provides rim protection that Karl Anthony Towns will never. And I know that without OG Anunoby, they're missing that weak side rim protection. But I would argue very, very strongly that they are making up those trade-offs in other areas when you compare those two lineups relatively. And I would argue that lineup beat opponents by 33 points per 100 possessions. 33 points across over 300 possessions of non-garbage time. We're not comparing two lineups here that are in that echelon. This lineup that we're talking about here, Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, and Karl Anthony Towns, doesn't need to outscore opponents by 33 points per 100 possessions to be better than a lineup that has Precious Achiuwa at power forward next to Josh Hart. The spacing concerns are just always going to be there, and especially against smart coaches like Ime Udoka, who, without his two best players, knowing the way Tom Thibodeau was going to coach, came out of the game, was just like, we're just going, apologies if you don't like cursing, screw it. We're just gonna go small out of the gate. We're gonna switch everything. They were switching everything out of the gate. And you know what? Whichever way the rebounding battle goes, we don't really care. All we care about is the overall trade-off, the overall net. And you really, really get hurt when against a coach like that, you still just stick to this. We need big guys out there. We need size. You're going to get hurt in other ways. You're not going to be able to create enough shots. And what you see in these lineups isn't the 3-point percentage go down. And the 3-point percentage was awful tonight. You see the 3-point volume go down, because it's not that they don't make threes. It's that they can't shoot them, because there's only a number of 3-point shooters on the court. And in today's game in 2025, those guys just can't create the great looks. That's why you see Brunson operating inside the arc so much of these lineups. You just have to get Deuce McBride into the starting lineup long term, or not long term, but as long as OG Anunoby's out, that is just always going to be this team's path to success, in my opinion.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. How about a Broadway show? Can't wait to take my kids to Broadway. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Seeing live performers, it's the best. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
The Oklahoma City Thunder beat the Milwaukee Bucks down to a pulp.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Thunder played the Bucks in a semi-rematch of the NBA Cup. Only the fact of the matter is the Bucks played nobody in this game. So it took some of the luster out of this game. But how are you doing today?
I am doing well tonight. Yeah, it was the kind of sort of Bucks, the kind of rematch. Look, obviously without Giannis, Dame, Lopez, Middleton, Bobby Portis Jr., they didn't have their guys. But the Thunder, as Shea said in the postgame, took care of business.
That's all you got to do is taking care of business if you're Oklahoma City. And they did so with this win. Speaking of Shea, he took care of business early and often. I mean, he scored 30 points by halftime of this contest. And I think that there's a couple things here. Number one, let's just say Shea's stat line, 34 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds in 22 minutes of work. How can it get better than that? Well, guess what? He shot 79% from the floor and 66% from 3. This is 2K numbers from SGA, and he did it in real life against the Milwaukee Bucks. He was a plus 34 from scoring 34 points in that first half. Only played a smattering, if you will, in the third quarter. I thought that SGA completely dominated, and I think that SGA just showed you that if you do not have a real trusted rim protector, you just can't stop him, because Andre Jackson Jr. is a excellent Shea defender. And nobody shuts Shea down, and Andre doesn't either. But in terms of making life difficult on Shea, Andre is one of the best players in the league at doing that. But he's always been helped out by he has that backline support. In this game, he did not have that backline support. So he still did his job. But like once Shea's inevitably breaks that down and there's no one there to stop him at the rim, it's just curtains for Milwaukee, and he can just name his score. So I think as you talk about playoff matchups, you talk about who is better than the Thunder, or who are the Thunder better than, or how many games the series will go. The most important thing the other team has to identify is who is their trusted rim protector and how often can he be on the court, because Shea will be on the court in the playoffs all but 8 minutes. And if you don't have a rim protector for all of those minutes, he's going to make your life just absurdly difficult.
Yeah, it was a layup line for Shea tonight. He was asked about that, specifically about getting to the rim. And he said, look, I'm just going to take what the defense gave him. And tonight the defense gave him that rim. He could have scored 50 for the third time in less than 2 weeks tonight. Honestly, had he played a full slate of minutes, like 35, 36 minutes tonight, he would have got to 50. 34 points in 22 minutes. That's just a silly stat line, quite honestly, especially when you look at the efficiency. With all the Twitter and social media talk about being a free throw merchant, which that's a whole other thing. My man only shot 3 free throws tonight and still ended up with 34 points in 22 minutes. It's because he went from the field 15 of 19 and then 2 of 3 from 3. Shea was he was a plus 34 in 22 minutes. Like I said, could have scored 50 had he wanted to. He checked out with over 6 minutes left in the third quarter and never saw the floor again because the Thunder up by over 40 points.
Yeah, this is a game where the Thunder never trailed, and they got up by 44 points at one point. The garbage time ends up making the score look closer than it really was, and that's saying a lot because they finished the night winning 125-96 over Milwaukee, but it wasn't even that close for Oklahoma City. They just ran away with this game. They dominate the glass 55-37 on the rebound count. They actually did have more turnovers than Milwaukee, but again, garbage time factors in 17-14 on the turnover battle. And then the Thunder shot 51% from the floor, 39% from three, and 87% from the charity stripe, including that fourth quarter with Adam Flagler's minutes. The Bucks shot 37% from the floor, 33% from three, and 62% at the free throw line. Points in the paint, the Thunder dominate. Second chance points, the Thunder dominate, and fast break points, the Thunder were able to oust the Bucks by a couple. So, Brandon, there's a lot of different directions we can go. First and foremost, you and your buddies at Media Row had your little chuckles at Adam Flagler, friend of the pod. People forget. I'm not going to stand for it. We've never in the history of the league genuinely cared about what happens during garbage time. Does he take a lot of shots? There's no defending that. He takes a lot of shots, and he's a willing shooter. He is quick to shoot. He is a confident shooter. But I think it is unfair to speaking now to social media to grade Adam Flagler on these fourth quarter minutes, where one, the shots are still coming in the same ways that the Thunder's offense wants them to. It's just that he's the one shooting them and not Shea, and they're not going in at the same rate, and it looks messier. But it's fundamentally the same stuff. And number two, clearly you want to see more of these shots going. No one wants to shoot 9% from the floor. Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to be on a streak and a slump as bad as Adam Flagler is on right now. But it's 12 minutes in a blowout game. He is way more talented than this. That there's a reason why he's on a two-way contract, because he is supremely talented. And I just think that people get a little out of hand with these shots, because guess what? Somebody's going to shoot them. Like, somebody's going to shoot these fourth quarter shots. It just so happens to be Adam Flagler, and he clanked a lot of them, but I think that it's so overblown. I mean, Mark got asked about it post game. Who cares, truly? And he is way better than this. So it's just, I just kind of do feel bad for him of like, this is going to be his reputation, even though if you would spend any amount of time watching the OKC Blue, you would see just how good he really is. But Brandon, Ousmane Dieng, what a night. The Oos was loose tonight, Brandon. 21 points from him, 5 assists, 8 rebounds, 1 steal. He had a dunk in transition. He had a dunk going through the lane over contacts. He had a sidestep 3, and you can just rat-a-tat-tat these buckets from Oos whenever. That's been a missing part of his game, where he has not played with offensive force. He has not had memorable moments on the offensive end. The defense has always been NBA caliber, but the offense is lagged behind, and tonight he kind of put it together.
Yeah, I thought Oos was great tonight. And it wasn't just because, the Bucks garbage time. He scored most of his points while, the Bucks were still playing. Obviously, they weren't playing their guys, but the guys that they had in the game. He played real minutes tonight. From the Bucks' perspective, I'm trying to be kind here. Obviously, the Bucks weren't playing great players, but Oos did play real minutes against the guys they did play. And he ended up with 21 points, 1 off from his career high. And it was the way that he got it to me. Like Isaiah Joe was asked about it post-game, and he thought that Oos has been a lot more aggressive offensively lately, this season in particular. And I think we can all see that. He's kind of put some games together. 21 points, 9 of 13 from the field. That included 4 dunks, a putback dunk, a couple aggressive drives. He was 3 of 5 from 3, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 1 steal. I just thought that Oos had a really nice game overall tonight. And, if anything, I was bummed out because he was 1 off from his career high of 22. And he had that 21 with 8 minutes to go, 7 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. And he only took a couple more shots, which credit to him. He played within the flow of the game. He was passing the ball around. He wasn't taking bad shots. He wasn't trying to, I was kind of hoping, we saw Aaron Wiggins 40 piece last game. I was hoping we'd get an Ousmane Dieng 30 piece tonight. I think the crowd would have been really into it. Shout out, by the way, to the OKC crowd, Loud City. There's been a lot of blowouts in OKC this season. and that crowd is staying, and they're cheering for these guys that are playing in the fourth quarter. And Adam Flagler, going back to him, by the way, I was not chuckling at Adam Flagler. I won't name any names.
Yeah, we won't name the names, but they know who they are. They listen to the show and they know who they are. And I'll never forgive you guys.
But the crowd was like really rooting for Flagler to hit a shot. When he hit one, they went berserk. Like you would think it was like, a meaningful basket, in a close game, because they were just happy for him. So shout out to the Thunder fans as well.
Yeah, shout out to them. J. Will played really well. Isaiah Joe is playing really well. 5 for 8 again from 3, just lighting the Nets on fire from beyond the arc. Isaiah Hartenstein got 12 rebounds in this game. Lou Dort was 2 for 2. Really, he went 4 for 4 overall. He was perfect for scoring 12 points in his limited action, 20 minutes. And to Mark's point post game, these games, like why they still matter and why I wouldn't blame you for turning the game off at halftime. You're well within your right to do that. It doesn't make you a fake fan or whatever, but the games do matter because of what a benefit it is and a luxury it is that in the midst of this pre-All-Star break schedule, or if you look at where they're at today and where they need to get to, which is next Thursday, they have so many games crammed in that to have a night like this where you only play Shea 22 minutes, you only play Lou 20 minutes, you only play Kenny Hustle 21 minutes, and he had to play some garbage time. You only play Hartenstein 18 minutes. And like to have a game like this for as limited of bodies as you have and to be able to get a blowout win all comes together and makes this a really good night for the Thunder. I did ask Isaiah Joe after the game if he wants to be in the 3-point contest, and he does. He's waiting on the phone call from Adam Silver. So maybe Adam will pick up the phone.
Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there is no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy for you to get in on the action. And with live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. Live betting feature will also allow you to stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, well, that's just icing on the cake. And one bet that you could look at with that $5 could be on the NBA tonight. Let's check it out. The Indiana Pacers continue a westward road trip to face the Portland Trailblazers, and our favorite FanDuel likes the Pacers by 5 points. The Pacers are on a bit of a heater, so maybe they can keep up that momentum. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you could score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
It's official. OC stands for officially Kaylee.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Sarge.
Yes, sir, Mr. Hickman.
This was a move that a lot of people wanted. Some people were opposed to. There was still confusion around Nick Caley being the offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. But Nick Caley, former Rams tight end coach and passing game coordinator, he's a guy that went to John Carroll. So the connections between Nick Caserio and Nick Caley are there. Spent nearly a decade with the New England Patriots. The last couple of seasons has soaked in a lot. Culture matters. Culture matters. The last couple of seasons, he soaked in a lot of knowledge from Sean McVay and what a successful offense looked like. Sarge, before we dive into the decision to bring in and hire Nick Caley, I want to read an excerpt I read from Jordan Rodriguez, who was talking about the Rams offense and how much it commands from the quarterback. This is where she said the Rams veteran quarterback scans the defense across from him, shouting words to teammates that reveal any number of details that he sees and gets them into or out of different plays and protections. He receives as many as 3 calls from head coach Sean McVay, and these have tags attached to them, which are words or phrases that either clarify the call or help teammates understand any adjustments in the offensive protections that may come. Adjustments is hopefully what the Houston Texans are getting from Nick Caley as their new offensive coordinator. Sarge, what are your thoughts?
Well, John, I'll tell you this. I'm not upset. I'm not happy. I'm not sad. I'm curious. And what I like what the Houston Texans did was they went out and they got a position coach. Bobby had never coached a position when when D'Amico Ryans brought him here. Sorry, Sean, listen, I'm at Madison Square Garden right now with the Houston Rockets taking on the New York Knicks. And all this is starting to happen right now. So I'm like, basketball, Ime Udoka was named Coach of the Month. Football, they got an offense coordinator. So just give me a second and work with me. But, John, I'm curious to see, and I think that what they did was they put their finger on the pulse of someone that Nick Caserio knew, someone has coached a position of need, because that tight end's position is really, really interesting when it comes to what you're going to need from the tight end position as far as the run scheme is concerned, as far as blocking is concerned. I mean, they are a part of the line. And I guess my only pushback would be, this is still a first-year offensive coordinator calling plays. This is not an experienced play caller. I know a lot of people wanted Nick Caley. I know a lot of people were pushing for and advocating for him, but he's still a first-year offensive coordinator. He's still a person that's calling plays for the first time. But what I will say he has on his side, John, is the phone number of Sean McVay, his mentor. He has someone that he can call and run things by, well, until they play, because the Rams and the Rams and the Texans play next season. So I'm pretty sure that Sean is going to put him on do not disturb.
D&D.
Yeah, but he does have the phone number to someone who has been his mentor, someone who does like him. And John, he has 2 years worth of what not to do coming into the Houston Texans. He has 2 years of what not to do with Bobby Sloak. Do not go down this road, that Bobby. So he can take, it's one of those things where you can take the good and leave the bad. And now you can go and you can sit down with CJ, because CJ is a huge fan of that Rams offense. He's a huge fan of Sean McVay. He's a huge fan of Matthew Stafford. And at this point of his career, Matthew Stafford is still effective. And if he could still be effective at this part of his career, then that means that CJ sees that could be him, later on down the line. But now if he gets into a system like a Sean McVay system, he can move his career to the trajectory to the trajectory in which he's supposed to be going. One thing that I love about Sean McVay is he's very smart. His mind, he has a brilliant mind. And, even though Bill Belichick tricked him, the week prior to the Super Bowl, but we'll talk about that at another time. For hope that he learned from that, he did, as he won his own Super Bowl. But I like this tree, John, and I like Sean McVay's tree way better than I like Kyle Shanahan's tree.
So as my first initial reaction to that was, I wonder if Houston caught wind of, hey, somebody else, another team is interested in bringing in Nick Caley to fill their void at offensive coordinator. Nick Caley did meet with Tampa Bay. One of the things that I thought would be a huge failure for Houston and will blow back in their faces if they took too long interviewing a lot of different guys and they miss out on the guy that they actually wanted to bring in. And so kudos to Houston, if that's the case, for bringing in somebody, bringing in Nick Caley and bringing in their guy. But it also feels like for Houston, hey, we like the philosophy and the background of Caley. He already has relationships here in the building. But more so, and I think more important for us to look into, is just whether we like the move or not is done. Now let's look at weighing the pros versus the cons and how they stack up to one another. The biggest con, he is not an experienced play caller. He is a first-time play caller. This will be his first year calling plays, and a lot of what we like about Caley is due to the system he's attached to. That was the same thing we said about Bobby Sloak 2 seasons ago. Now the pros are, the system he's attached to is from an offensive guru, Sean McVay, and that system is built around creating adjustments, and by doing that, that allows for an offense to be diverse. Based on what we saw from Houston's run game last year, Caley could come in and boost that offensive line, how it was currently constructed and put together because of his time under Sean McVay. And again, a lot of that is due to diversity of the offense, and also the Rams down the stretch of last year throughout the year altogether in 2024, they had to stretch their means. Both Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp missed time, and they were able to find guys to come in and do things well, and was able to understand what each receiver, what each playmaker does well and maximizes that. That's what we wanted to see from an offensive coordinator perspective for the Houston Texans. And what I like most about that is they were able to do that by creating leverage to attack defenses when they use the motion, pre-snap motions. Los Angeles was averaging 1.4 more yards per play, and the success rate was 8% higher when pre-snap motion was used. Ultimately, this was an offense that had to stretch their means a lot last season and here in Houston, did not do a very good job consistently in maximizing their guys when things broke down, didn't create counter punches, and kept running into a brick wall, literally, right? Whether it was screen plays not going anywhere or outside zone runs that were not going anywhere, or we had to see Joe Mixon make a little out of nothing. So the hope with Caley is he is an extension of Sean McVay and LaFleur. It's nearly impossible to revamp an entire offense in one offseason. So with that being said, this guy feels like more of a solution base for the NFL, for the Houston Texans, and he got the job. And I think overall, the question, what could you have done with our roster last year to get the most out of? Jeff Nixon, could he answer that question well? Brian Johnson, did he answer that question well? Out of all of the other candidates, did they answer that question well? And I come away feeling like the pro is Nick Caley may have answered that question the best out of all of those guys, and he became Houston's number one target.
John, I look at it like this, and I love what you said about the con and what we mentioned earlier is that he hasn't called plays, and that's another. When you have to call plays, that's a step up that you have to do, and you have to be prepared for any and everything. And so hopefully Sean McVay has prepared him to be able to make in-game adjustments, something that Bobby Slowick suffered from. But I think that one of the pros for him, and it works for him, and it works for him right now, is the Patriot South stigma has passed. Because if this would have been if this would have been a hire 2 years ago, when they hired D'Amico, they would have tried to bring in him, Nick Caley, then it would have been the same. Oh, so y'all haven't gotten Patriot South out of your system just yet. But Nick is now able to bring in a guy after having D'Amico for 2 years and after having, experimenting with Bobby Slowick those 2 years. And now he's saying, okay, let me go and get somebody that I know. And this is how, like we talked about before, John, this is how corporate America works. Most of the time, the people that you know are the ones who get the jobs. The people that are doing the hiring go and they hire the people that they know. And so, not only does his background help him with Nick Caserio, the fact that he has the resume to go along with the relationship. So that's what I want when people, when people are R&R, no, not rest and relaxation. It's resume and relationships.